to Random Fandom Chats. I'm Dee Dee.
I'm Tandra.
And this is Annabeth. Here we talk about sci-fi and fantasy things from books, TV, movies, comics, video games. And today we're talking about the movie Total Recall, which came out in 1990 and starred Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And Sharon Stone. And Michael Ironside and several other people. Okay, so when do you remember seeing the movie the first time?
I think I was 15 or 16 at the time. I've only seen the movie twice, a few years ago, and then the first time I watched it. But I think I was about 15 or 16 when you first showed me the movie.
So what's your thoughts on it? What did you think about it?
It's definitely not one of my most favorite sci-fi movies of all time. I love the concept and the idea, but I just felt that the movie itself was just a little bit overly violent in some spots. Sometimes it was able to be overlooked, but that kind of made it to where I wouldn't be able to watch the movie a lot, and where it really kind of just wasn't one of my most favorites.
That was typical of movies made around that era.
True.
There was a lot of violence in them. I'm not sure exactly why, but that was really common.
Well, of course, I loved the Terminator movies when I was really little, which is so odd. I loved Terminator movies when I was really little, but for some reason, this one, the violence in it just kind of struck a negative chord with me more so than those movies for some reason, and I'm not sure why.
I think the violence was different on how it was handled. The violence in the movie was so intense, it actually originally got an X rating.
Really?
They had to calm it down a little bit and change camera angles, not quite as bad in some scenes before we get an R rating. And I think it's because the type of violence that's in it is different than in the Terminator movies, because the Terminator movies, it's mostly the Terminator just going around doing carnage.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not extremely graphic. I mean, yeah,
Right.
He mows down people with guns and whatnot, but it's not like showing each and every body part flying apart and whatnot.
Right, and that makes a difference.
It's a little bit more toned down.
A little bit.
A little bit more disconnected, I think.
I think that might have something to do with a little bit of the director styles a little bit too. Because the director, was one, I think that was something a little bit more common for his movies.
Yeah, I think he definitely kind of like Quentin Tarantino, he really likes the violence
A
and
little
whatnot.
bit. So I think he was more willing to show that than some directors would be. But other than the violence, what did you think about, the actual movie
I
itself?
thought the acting was very good. I kind of wish that the female characters had a little bit more of a presence, but for a movie that was, pretty much a product of its time, the female characters in it definitely kicked some butt, which I liked. Like I said, I love the concept and the story, and I have this kind of weird fascination with anything that takes place on Mars. I like stories that take place on Mars for some reason.
I loved most of the story. I love the whole idea that you've got this guy, normal, ordinary guy, who's having these really vivid dreams and then finds out he's not this normal, ordinary guy, and he's got other bigger picture things going on, and then of course he goes to Mars, and we got all the science fiction elements that even kind of reminded me a little bit of some of Robert Heinlein's work, where you've got the mutants and some of the other stuff going on there. That stuff reminded me a lot of those stories, and so I enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed the whole, and the visual effects in the movie were awesome.
Especially for its time.
Especially. They were one of the last movies to still use a lot of model making and stuff in the special effects. They did use a little bit of CGI work, but most of it tended, and honestly, I usually like model work stuff a little bit better.
It seems a little bit more real.
It does to me.
Especially with like the 90s time period where things like CGI were still in its infancy, and it looked pretty bad when they actually
a lot of
did
times
do it.
And so I really enjoyed that. One of my favorite scenes, of course, is when he arrives on Mars and he's, he doesn't look like him. He looks like this, one woman, and then all of a sudden the face, breaks apart. I mean, I remember seeing that for the first time and go, whoa.
Like, that's interesting.
It's so stunning. It's so cool looking, and it's the neat idea that you got somebody disguised this way and then all of a sudden turns something else. The part of the movie that was probably as dissatisfying was actually the ending.
Spoiler alert.
I had a professor in college who actually was a mythology professor.
Really?
And he actually was talking about this movie, and that in some ways it did not fit the right mold for the way a myth is supposed to go and take place, and the main reason was the ending.
Really? Yeah. Now that you mentioned it, the ending was probably the thing that really...
It makes the movie not as good as it really could be, which is kind of sad, because you would think that the way, it ends with, everything coming up roses and all this...
Which happened way too fast. You cannot terraform a planet that fast.
And all this other stuff that basically, he basically wins, and he, defeats the bad guys and all this other stuff. So you would think it would really hit the mark. But for some reason, it just is a little left to center. It misses it just a little bit.
And it also kind of seemed... maybe I just don't remember each individual scene of the movie that well, but it kind of seemed random to me that they added this whole, like, alien aspect to it, because it was mostly a movie about a resistance and trying to overthrow this oppressive government, and then towards the end they kind of just threw in
this alien thing, right?
And so it kind of just seemed random to me. I was like, okay, I guess you can go there.
Yeah, it's just, where'd this come from? It was kind of out of left field. The movie did go through a lot of rewrites. I think I read somewhere that up to maybe 40 different rights. And
a lot of different directors and concept art.
Yeah, and it was originally based on a Philip K. Dick story. It didn't quite totally follow the whole story all the way along or anything, but it was originally...
Probably had some of the same bones. I've never read the short story.
Yeah, I haven't either. I guess it's loosely based at this point.
Yeah.
Really. Now, you had seen the newer version of the movie, and I had seen it too.
But you don't remember a lot of it, do you?
Not as much as I would like. I've only seen it once, and some first impressions, What did you think of the newer version?
Okay, maybe this is just a product of my generation, but I actually like the newer one. One thing I didn't like about it is I didn't like how none of it took place on Mars. It was all on Earth, and the parts that would take place on Mars was just kind of like this trashed up colony, I think in the Australia territory, I think is where it was. That I didn't really like. I didn't really understand why they decided to go with that instead of just keeping the traditional, part of it taking place on Mars. But I thought for a modern adaptation, it was pretty good. Usually I'm not a huge fan of remakes. I think that as long as you don't try to compare it blow by blow to the older movie, I think it's a pretty good movie, to be honest.
So do you think it hit the mark a little bit better than the original?
Not necessarily, no. Again, I haven't read the short story, so I don't know if maybe that adaptation sticks to the short story a little bit better or not. But I did, like I said, for a remake, it was pretty good in my opinion. And I think, especially for a movie on its own, it was pretty good.
Well, the other thing I remember we had talked about, a little bit about, was in the newer version, there didn't seem to be as much urgency for him to get away from all of this stuff happening to him and get to where, in the original movie, he was desperate to get to Mars and get away from, and you felt like, oh my God, he really needs to go now or he's going to be killed. I didn't feel the same way in the newer version. It was almost like, yeah, I can get there, but it was kind of like playing a video game. I've got this main storyline I need to follow, but I can go off and explore these caves and go over here and do this first and whatever. So I don't know, maybe that's a weird opinion there, but it just seemed to me like it was not quite as, oh my God, you really need to do this.
Well, and I also I like modern science fiction movies that have a lot of kind of more holographic type of modern, advanced technology and whatnot, and they showcase that a little bit more in the newer movies. So I think that's where the whole, it being a movie on its own, I kind of like better because they had a lot of interesting technology. They had these communication devices directly in their hands, which I thought was really cool.
25 years later, you're going to have better, cooler stuff than what you had, when you first made the movie.
So I think, again, from the standpoint of it being just a movie on its own, I think I like having technology and stuff like that. I love seeing concepts like that.
So the movie is really fun to watch just to see some of the cool aspects and like I said, the whole storyline itself where you're, just watching what happens to this guy and his whole, it's kind of like a government conspiracy, story, and we were good at those. We have some really good ones out there where people feel this need to
overthrow their oppressors.
Yeah, and the government's chasing them the whole time, and they have to get away, and they have to use their resources to, do stuff. And so from that point of view, the story is really fun to watch, and it's really interesting. Like I said, and the visual effects at the time were really, really good, and some other stuff like that. Now, one of the things you barely touched on early on was women in the movie. Now, granted, the storyline it's mostly his story, and so it makes sense that the women are going to be kind of superfluous in it a little bit, or not as high ranking up as some other stories would be.
Well, like I said, for a movie of its time, very, very early 90s, pretty much still in the 80s, for a product of its time, it was pretty, progressive.
Well, yeah, Sharon Stone she learned Taekwondo and everything else to do some of the things that she did in the movie.
Well, and the fight scene between the two women was probably one of the first movies of that time era that didn't just have them clawing and
right, they were actually really fighting.
They were really actually fighting like people would.
Right, and she even held her own against Arnold Schwarzenegger a little bit. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, any woman that can do that, wow. So from that point of view, I think it was starting to be a little more
progressive.
On the other hand, the women were kind of just still sex objects a little bit,
eye candy
a little bit, and all that. But based on what the story was and all, I don't think it was that bad.
Well, and I guess they were going to cast one of the two main female characters. They were going to use a female martial artist, and some of the male actors in the movies kind of threw a fit, saying that they didn't want to be overshadowed by a female martial artist, so they didn't cast her.
Boy, talk about insecurity.
Right? It's like, you're really worried about being overshadowed by a female martial artist? Okay.
Yeah, well.
Whatever. Moving on. So that's just a little tidbit that kind of annoyed me. I'm just like, okay.
Well, those scenes still worked out pretty well in the movie, and I think they did an okay job.
Like I said, I very much like that the two women actually fought and not just, cat scratched at each other.
Right. So that part was pretty good, too. So, all in all, it's a decent movie to kind of rewatch. Like I said, don't have super high expectations of feeling incredibly fulfilled by the end of it.
Yeah. And definitely be prepared for some graphic violence.
Definitely.
It's definitely a rated R movie.
Okay, well, we want to see what we're going to do next time.
Is she awake enough to pick something?
She's kind of comatose.
I'll just let you take it.
We'll see if she wants to choose any. Hey, kiddo, you want to choose one? No? Oh, Harry Potter.
Ooh,
a character.
Just the character.
The character Harry Potter.
Okay, well, we did Prisoner of Azkaban
not too long ago.
So, alrighty then.
Okay. Well,
if you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing. Tell your friends. If you have any suggestions for things that you want us to touch on or maybe put in our suggestion box, feel free to leave comments. Tell us what you think of the movie. Tell us if you think that watching this made you want to go watch it again, or maybe pick it up for the first time. Maybe go read the short story, or what have you.
Okay. All right. We'll see you next time.